So this is another example that we are looking, as we have recommended already. So first try to read through this passage on your own, right? And then try to answer these questions. So there's no options, just more like a subjective thing. Just think and see what would be relevant, answer for these 3 questions. And then we will discuss this RC in detail. Hope we have done that. So let's now look at this. So as I've discussed in the earlier video as well, we strongly recommend you to build this habit at least in the initial days, where you try to detail out the RC, build the structure of it, pick the key points, and then so make a map, which ideally you should be making it in your mind. So we are asking you to make it in this. Just give me a moment. We're just asking you to make this in your on paper right now. Ideally we want you to do it in your mind, but that might take a bit of time. Maybe you can do it already. If you're doing, that's great, but still, if you're struggling, I would recommend you to make it on paper first. Maybe after few RCs, when you get a good understanding of what are the points that you should be making note of in your mind, then that's when you will be able to do that better. So what I'm asking you to do is first read the passage, note down the important points or summary of the passage while you're reading it on paper. Now you do it for 5 RCs, 10 RCs. Once you get a feeling that you are able to actually identify the relevant points in the passage, right, making the note of the important points in the right manner, that's when you can start practicing it, making it in your mind and not on the paper. Right, slowly you'll get used to it, and then you will get the practice of doing the mental noting of these things in your mind itself, so that you don't waste time. For now, don't worry on the time, focus on getting the right points and understanding them in the right manner as the most important thing at this point. Right, so let's get started. So modern archaeological finds can still contribute much to the study of ancient literature. So this seems to be like link between some modern archaeological finds, and they're saying can still contribute much to the study. The author feels that the modern archaeological finds can actually contribute to the study of literature, right? Study of ancient literature. So that's a statement the passage starts off with. Study of ancient literature. For example, now he's detailing this. This is like the broad idea that the first part of the passage is starting with, and then he's giving an example. For example, 40 years ago, a survey of the early Greek dramatist line, Aeschylus' plays, would have started with the suppliant woman. So that's like this is an author who writes plays, dramas. I don't know the name, Aeschylus, let's pronounce it that way. So started with the suppliant woman, right? A survey of this early Greek dramatist would have started off with this particular play. So if I'm looking at this guy, many factors internal to the play. So that's like they've given an example, right? So this guy called Aeschylus, right, this is a dramatist, right, writes dramas and all, that's okay. So would have started off with his one of the thing called the suppliant woman, whatever. Many factors internal to the play, but perhaps most especially the prominence of the chorus, which in this play has the main role, led scholars to consider it one of the Aeschylus' earlier works. So scholars, right, have analyzed, have done some research or whatever the thing, they have come to a conclusion. They consider the suppliant woman as one of the early works of this guy, right? How did they come up to this conclusion? There's a clue written here, right? Many factors internal to the play, right? So some internal factors, but perhaps, the words like this, but perhaps, most especially the prominence of chorus, right? So there are some lot of internal factors they have used, in the play, like maybe the language used, setup that they would have referred to that in the drama, etc. Whatever they mean by the internal factors. Let's say if I'm writing a drama which says that there's a king and there's a queen and all, then at least you can understand that it is not set up in this context, right? Not in this latest era. So it might have been referring to some older thing. So just giving a very broad example, some internal factors like maybe the language they've used, maybe the cities they were talking, maybe the stories they're using would give you a sense of what time frame this would have been talking about. But perhaps most especially the prominence of the chorus, right? So that's like the chorus that has been put up in this drama, the importance given to that, the prominence that they've given, right? So which in this plays the main role, led scholars to consider it to be one of the Achilles work. So basically the clue has been mostly from this side, the chorus. They have analyzed the type of chorus they've used, and they sort of felt that looking at the importance that has been given to the play, the scholars have analyzed and come to a conclusion that it would be one of the early works of the Achilles, right? The suppliant woman. That's what this line is. The consensus was that here was a drama truly reflecting an early stage in the evolution of tragedy out of the choral lyric. So again, this continuation of that so choral lyric is the some part of or some type of maybe chorus that you see, the lyrics that you see, maybe they saw how the chorus has evolved over the years, the lyrics used and the chorus that's been used. Maybe looking at the way the chorus has been used in this drama, they've come up to a conclusion, right? The consensus was here that the drama was truly reflecting an early stage, right? Early stage in the evolution of tragedy out of the choral lyric. Again, this is like continuation of this part, how they could come up with how they could use chorus to analyze when did this drama get written or something like it. So the consensus was that the drama truly reflecting an early stage in the evolution of tragedy out of the choral lyric. So that's continuation and explaining this part, chorus being used as a prominent feature by the scholars to decide that this particular drama is written, or it's one of the early works of this guy Achilles. The play was dated as early as 490s BC, right? So that's like written that they are based on all this, they think it's written somewhere in 490s BC, well before Achilles' play the Persians of 472 BC. Well before Achilles' play of what is that thing they're calling the Persians. What you need to understand if you by chance are confused, right? BC runs in the reverse order, right? Like 1000 BC happens first, and then you see 900 BC and 800 BC. And similarly, 472 BC is like 490 BC happens first, and then you come to 472 BC, and slowly you'll come to 0 BC, and then you start with AD. Right? So that basically means, that's why it clearly says, right? 490s BC, well before Achilles' play the Persians of 472 BC. 492 is before 472. In AD, obviously 490 is after 472, right? That's how our mind might think. That's what I'm saying. In BC, it happens in the reverse way, like larger number to a smaller number. So the play was dated as early as 490s BC, well before the Persians, Achilles' play Persians. So Achilles has also written the Persians, and it is expected to be written in 472 BC. And 490 BC is the time dating of this suppliant woman, the drama that they are talking about. Then in 1952, a fragment of papyrus found at Auxerre, Heinches. So that's basically, see, papyrus is like a thick paper that was used in the older time. So they got, so in 1952, so what happened in 1952? They found out some evidence. That's what you need to understand. This is a city closer to in some place in Egypt, so that's okay. In a particular place, doesn't matter even if you don't know that. So there's a evidence that they found. So basically a papyrus fragment, that's a piece of papyrus. That's like finding some older paper of some very old era, thing like that, was published stating the official circumstances and results of a dramatic contest. So in 1952, the archaeological finds, right, gave us an evidence which was basically a fragment of a papyrus. So this papyrus dates to some older generation, right, which we don't know, but what did it show? What text was there on that paper? Was publishing the official circumstances and results of a dramatic contest. So there was a papyrus evidence that they got, which has basically results of a contest, the drama contest, right? That's what they have got. And the fragment announced that Achilles won the first prize with his Danaid technology, of which the suppliant woman is the opening play. So we have been talking about the suppliant woman all the while. Suppliant woman is basically part of this Danaid tetralogy. So suppliant woman is the opening play of this Danaid tetralogy, right? So Achilles is there. So he has written this thing called Danaid tetralogy. So that would be combination of lot of plays, and the first play is the suppliant, the opening play is the suppliant woman. and this thing won the competition. That's what it says, right? The fragment announced that Achilles won the first prize with this Danaid tetralogy, of which the suppliant woman is the opening play, and defeated Sophocles in the process. So there's another guy called Sophocles, so he got defeated. So then they continued saying Sophocles did not compete in any dramatic contest before 468 BC. So the first time Sophocles competed in a competition was in 468 BC. And here clearly the papyrus is talking about Achilles winning a competition, drama competition, where Sophocles also participated in it, right? So how could he participate in a competition before 468? No, right? Because it clearly says that Sophocles did not compete in any dramatic contest before 468 when he won his first victory. So that's the first time he participated and he won it. So next time he again competed in some competition, which is what the results are, shown in this papyrus. And apparently Sophocles lost and Achilles won with his Danaid tetralogy. That's what it means. So this is sort of, giving us a confusion, right? Why? Because till that point people were thinking that the suppliant woman, which is part of Danaid tetralogy, was written in 490 BC. But what's happening now? You see something different here. Here I am seeing that Achilles won a competition of drama with the same thing, suppliant woman, right? And it does say that Sophocles did not participate in any competition till 468 BC. So this is a bit of contradiction, right? If he wrote in 490 BC, imagine, as I said, right, 490 is here, 468 will be after 490. Like what? How many years later? 22 years later. After 22 years, you will come to 468 BC. So it's basically, if it was dated in 490 BC, how would Achilles, compete with Sophocles, who has never competed till 468? How would a book or a play, a drama was written 490, used after 22 years to compete in a competition, at least after 468, right? Sophocles has never participated in a competition till 468, and there's a competition that happened and these two competed. So that means this must have happened where he won this, right? The papyrus giving us this must have happened after 468 BC, that is like 465 BC or 450 BC or whatever it is. That's a thing that people have started to look at and see a contradiction happening. Hence, except by the special pleading, example that tetralogy was composed early in Achilles' career but not produced until 460s BC. So this is one special case that they are giving. Maybe it can happen that he has written it in 490 BC, right? That's like basically he has composed it in early of his career, but he did not produce it until 460s BC, right? As I said, right, so because they both competed in a competition with the Danaid tetralogy, that means this must have been published after 468 BC. So there are only two possible explanations that we can have. One is that the tetralogy, the Danaid tetralogy, was indeed written in 490 BC or close to that, but that was early days of his career and he did not produce it until the 460s BC. Or it might be that there is a mistake in interpreting it to belong to 490 BC. Maybe it actually belongs to 460s or 450s, right? That's what it says. So one of the exceptions is, hence, except by special pleading, the Danaid tetralogy must be put after 468 BC, right? See, if you understand this, then it's very easy. Why are they coming to this conclusion? They're saying because Sophocles never participated in a competition before 468 BC, and if Achilles won in a competition by competing with him, Sophocles, won a drama competition with the suppliant woman, it must have happened after 468 BC. So that's why they are thinking it must be put after 468, unless the exception is that it was composed much early in his career but did not produce. Leaving that exception, the conclusion is that this must have been written after 468 BC. In addition, a few letters in the fragment suggest the name Archidamidas, Archon. So it's basically meaning like a ruler. So there's some local ruler sort of it. So in the same fragment they could see this name as well, who was a ruler in 463 BC, which means that this competition, right, the results declaration must have happened close to that era, because the letter, the fragment, the papyrus that was found was talking about the results, and somewhere in the same papyrus they are also talking about this leader who was ruling in 463 BC. This means that this entire results and competition must have happened somewhere in 463 BC, maybe closer to that. Thus, perhaps tying the place to the precise date almost exactly halfway between Achilles 7 against Thebes of 467 BC and Oresteia. So this is basically talking about two of his Achilles works. So there's one work called 7 against Thebes, and it was written in 467 BC. And if I assume that this entire thing competition happened in 463 BC, so the Achilles play would be like 7 against Thebes, right? This happened in 467 BC. Let's say the Suppliant Woman and the Danaid trilogy, the Danaid tetralogy, right? It's all part of one thing, right? This is a bigger book and this is just opening play. This must have happened somewhere closer to 463 BC. And then what happened? The next thing is this Oresteia, right? Next is Oresteia, and I don't know when it happened, but it should be happening later because it says the precise date almost exactly halfway between Achilles 7 against Thebes of 467 BC and his Oresteia. So this Danaid tetralogy and Suppliant is in between in terms of time frames between 7 against Thebes and Oresteia. So that means 461, 460, this will be somewhere like 459, 460 or whatever, just an approximate, but that's okay. We don't know the exact year, let's leave that here. So that's the interpretation that we have had till now. Right, I'll just repeat this. So modern archaeological finds help us in study of ancient literature. That's the key generic idea that's starting the passage with. Then they've started to get into an example. Right, all the things that you see in this entire first passage is only justifying this with a simple example. Right, how the modern archaeological finds. Right, what is the modern archaeological finds? We found something in 1952, a papyrus. Right, that helped us to understand the ancient literature better, because till that point people were thinking that this play, the Suppliant Woman, was somewhere dated in 490. How did they come to this conclusion? They came to the conclusion by looking at the internal factors, and major factor was this chorus that they could see. It was prominence of the chorus was there, and also they saw that this chorus was looking, the lyrical wise or maybe the whatever the structure of chorus they analyzed was looking similar to the early stage in the evolution of the tragedy out of the choral lyric. So based on these elements, they thought the play was dated as early as 490s BC. That's the conclusion they came up with, right? And that is technically very well before this Achilles play, the Persians, which was dated to 472 BC. They talked about something. Okay, but in 1952, they found some modern, right? This is a modern era. They found some fragment that's an evidence. That's like, giving this explanation of this statement. So they found some fragment which was giving a results of a competition, and in the competition Achilles won first prize with this Danaid tetralogy, Suppliant Woman play, which and defeated Sophocles. And Sophocles apparently first competed only in 468 and would have competed after that. So there's no way that he would have competed before that, like in 490s or 480s, which is bringing the contradiction. How could a play which was written in 490 BC compete in a competition after 468 BC and win that? Right, that's a question mark people have started to look at. And then there's only one explanation, that is two explanations actually. Number one is that the tetralogy was written way early in his Achilles career, but it was not produced until 460. Or the tetralogy was indeed put after 468 BC, it's just that it was wrongly interpreted by the people. And this is what the author in the passage is believing to be, and that's why he's continuing with that only. Except the special pleading, the Danaid tetralogy must be put up after 468. And there also the additional evidence which was written that they got some ruler name who was a ruler around 463 BC. That is giving us a time sense of some of the Achilles work. So he has written 7 against Thebes in 467. The Danaid tetralogy with the Suppliant Woman play was written somewhere in 463 BC, and Oresteia would have been written somewhere in 459 BC or 460 BC, something like that. Right, now let's go to second para. The implication of the papyrus administered a severe shock to the vast majority of the classical scholars, who had confidently asserted that not only the role of the chorus but also the language, metrics and characterization all pointed to an early date. So this is again explaining the same thing. So this implication of the papyrus, right, whatever the understanding that we got from here, which is making basically the earlier interpretation as a wrong interpretation, has shocked, has turned out to be a severe shock to a lot of scholars, who confidently felt that based on the chorus, like how the chorus was structured and what they've used, right, the chorus, the type of the chorus and etc., then the language, the metrics, the characterization, these are all the internal factors, all pointed to an early date. They were very confidently feeling that it should be belonging to some early era like this, but this papyrus that was being found was a big shock for them, right? So a big shock to the scholars. because they have used all the internal factors and they've judged it, but it turned out to be wrong. The discovery has resulted in no less than a total re-evaluation of every chronological criterion that has been applied to or derived from Achilles' place. So this has started to become a big question, right? So discovery has resulted in no less than total re-evaluation of every chronological criterion, whatever the criteria they were using to judge, right, that has been applied to the Achilles' place and all, language or maybe the chorus or other internal factors, whatever they were trying to, okay, if this looks like this must be from particular era like 490, 480, etc. All of those things they've started to reevaluate because they got a big shock, right? A severe shock, which made them consider that whatever the criteria they've used to understand the chronology, they have started to question it and started to recheck, reevaluate it, right? So basically all of this shock led to the reevaluation of criterion, chronological criterion that they have applied or derived from the Achilles' place till now. Their activity has been brisk, so that's quick. They've done it very fast, and a new creed has spread. Like creed is like a community of a similar faith or etc. So that's basically like now a group of people have started to believe in this. Now they start to question and they start to re-look at all of this and they start to believe this. The prominence of the chorus in suppliant woman now is seen not as a sign of primitivism, but as analogous to the massive choral songs of Oresteia. Now they've started to because they've reevaluated it. Earlier they looked at chorus, they've analyzed in one particular style, right, in one way, and they thought it is similar to the primitive, that is what they said, right, early stage in the evolution of the tragedy or the choral lyric. They interpreted it that way and they thought this must be belonging to this thing, right? So that's like primitivism. They thought it is primitive is like early days, right? So they thought earlier in this way, but now because they came to know that this is wrong interpretation, now they came up with a new interpretation. Now they are seeing it similar to the massive choral songs of Oresteia, because they know that this must be somewhere close to Oresteia. Now they have tried to pick something common, right? Common with Oresteia. So that's because they have a clue that these two must be close to each other. So now they have tried to look at the choral songs of Oresteia and they are similar to suppliant woman. That somehow they've started to judge it. Statistics have been formulated or reformulated to show that stylistically the suppliant woman does actually occupy a position after the Persians and 7 against Thebes, which now become the primitive place and before the Oresteia. So now, because I know, right, see, they said Persians was in 1952. Persians was in 472 BC. So 472 BC, Persians, 7 against Thebes is 467, Danaic tetralogy is 463 and Oresteia is 459, 460 something approximately. So now the people have started to use some statistics to reformulate. The suppliant woman does actually occupy a position after the Persians and 7s, right? They are after these two, which now become the primitive place and before the Oresteia. So that's the position that they have taken. So all of these are basically the implications of finding this particular order. Based on these evidences, the papyrus that they found, purely based off that, it turned out to be a severe shock. Now they understood, okay, these are the facts. Now they started to reevaluate and build the criteria to satisfy these facts, right? So first thing is that they've tried to link the chorus to the common related things with Oresteia, which is closer in the time frame, rather than looking at it as a primitive thing. Earlier they thought the first play was suppliant woman, the Danaic tetralogy, that's like 490 BC, but now they have reformulated the statistics to show that the Persians and 7 against Thebes was the primitive play. After that came the suppliant woman and then came the Oresteia. While the new doctrine seems almost certainly correct, now they have corrected things and it looks like they are now sorted well. The one papyrus fragment raises the specter, the doubt, right? It's a concern that can raise that another may be unearthed, showing for instance that it was the posthumous production of the Danaic tetralogy which bested Sophocles and throwing the date once more into utter confusion. Now the author has given a statement which is a concern from his side. What is saying that till this point, till we found the papyrus in 1952, people are very confidently feeling that his work is 490 and they have built all the things around these facts. Just this one papyrus fragment raised so much of disruption and led to a lot of changes. What is the guarantee that it doesn't happen again? It can happen that people might see another papyrus which could be unearthed, which could be found, showing For example, he gave us an example how maybe another papyrus can pop up and give us a confusing perspective again. For example, let's say in 1980 later we found another papyrus, right? And then it says that this competition, which that papyrus before 1952 was conducted for some sort reason, and the prize was given to the Achilles play as a posthumous production of the Daniel tetralogy. So basically what it means is this, right? When people die, they still get some awards. So this posthumous is basically that something that's being given after a person's death, like a military person or maybe an author or sometimes even scientists and all. They've discovered something, they don't give any award or appreciation when he or she is alive, but post their death they might appreciate, and then they start to give something in honor of them. So that's something, the thing they're giving. Let's say, imagine a situation, 1980, a new papyrus is found and it gives us evidence which says that the Achilles has written it much earlier than the 463 BC when the competition was conducted, but because of his great work in the past, they have started to give an award for him on the posthumous production, a posthumous type. That is basically, it could have been written in 490, it's just that he got an award for it later. The publishing also might have happened in 490, but people do get sometimes awards very late in their life, sometimes even after their death. So that could be also a case. That could be a case. That's what they're saying. For instance, if we find something like it, the posthumous production of the Daniel tetralogy, which bested Sophocles and throwing a date once into confusion. So if that gives a particular example like this, then we get again confused, right? All the while we came up with this theory that it must be between the 467 to 460. Because of this entire concept, the competition was in between 467 and 460, because they felt that the awards have happened in 463 BC and that so and so. That is with a bigger assumption that Achilles would have won a competition with a work that was published in the recent times. He wouldn't win a competition with a publication which was done 30 years back or 25 years back. Right? That's the understanding of this. So that can happen. That's a question that they are saying. That's a concern raised by the author of the passage. Can this lead to more confusion if we find something else? But he feels that it is unlikely to happen, but it just warns us that perhaps the most salutary feature of the papyrus scrap is its message of the extreme difficulty of classifying and categorizing rigidly the development of a creative artist. So what it says is that this is very unlikely to happen, but what the author is trying to conclude here is that maybe this is a sign for us, it gives us a hint, or it gives us an understanding, it warns us basically. Perhaps it can happen. What you have to understand is the most salutary feature of this papyrus scrap is the message that it is giving, that it's very difficult to classify and categorize some author's development rigidly, just based on a simple information or simple framework or simple like internal factors of chorus you check and then you feel okay, this must be something like this. So this is a lesson for us to understand. It's a warning for us to understand that it's not that easy to classify and categorize an artist's work very simply with some simple factors. So that's a conclusion that the author gave. So let's look at these questions. What is the main theme or idea of the passage? If you ask me, the author has written this with a key perspective or key point, again as I said, is this, right? The first line. So modern archaeological finds are helping us to study and contribute, are contributing to study of ancient literature. That's a starting key point for me. Post that, he gave an example, right, of this Achilles play. He was just showing how some archaeological finds can change the what do you call it, the conclusions or the interpretations scholars had till that point. And then he has given the continuation of the story. But finally the key takeaway for me again is this, the last line. It says that it is basically giving us an understanding that these finds, leave the finds, basically you have to appreciate, take this warning from this current example, that it is very difficult for us to simply classify and categorize based on internal factors or some simple things. So you need more evidence for us to be a little bit more concrete, but this archaeological finds still help us to study this. So that's if you ask me, the two key points would be for me this, that's finds, modern archaeological finds help us in study, and then it is not so easy for scholars or any persons to be able to categorize and classify the work, date them that easily with some simple factors. We need more and more information to do that. So we just have to appreciate the fact that we are trying to guess within limitations that we have and try for more information to make it a better concrete judgment. And they gave the entire passage with an example of the Achilles play for us to understand it better. That's the key things in the passage. How did a fragment of papyrus found in this city affect the interpretation of scholars? So it's clear, right? Till that point, they were thinking at 490 BC, based on the internal factors, the chorus, etc. They were thinking that the suppliant woman was written somewhere closer to 490. But once they found it, all the clues have helped us to figure out that this should be closer to some 463 BC. Right? It's changed the interpretation, right? 490 BC was what it was dated, but basically they feel that it is closer to 463 BC. How did the scholars date the suppliant woman initially as a play composed in 490 BC? How did the scholars date? Simply using the internal factors, right? They've used the internal factors, the language, the characterization. Prominently, they've used the chorus, how it was closer to the, all this is written here, right? The consensus was that drama was reflecting an early stage in the evolution of tragedy of the choral lyric that helped them to get it to this. So they've used the internal factors, like they've also explained what they are like. Chorus, language, metrics and characterization all pointed to an early date. So that's what they've used to get this, right? So this is what how you should read and understand. I know this has been a very long session, but this is how you should actually read and understand, right? If you get these points very clear, I think the questions would not be even half difficult once you get this.